Captain Solara Vess stood on the bridge of the TSS Orion, gazing out at the sprawling expanse of Starbase Artemis. The massive space station hung against the starfield, a glittering jewel of human engineering and the linchpin of Earth's defenses in the Orion sector. Solara watched as transport ships and corvettes darted to and fro, a hive of activity amid the orderly rows of battlecruisers and carriers docked at the station's berths. There was an air of tense preparation, an undercurrent of grim anticipation. War was coming to the Orion sector. The hiss of an opening hatch broke her reverie. She turned to see her executive officer, Commander Ezra Malik, stride onto the bridge, his dark eyes glinting with a keen intelligence. "Captain, just got word from Fleet Command. The Orion is to undock and proceed to Rally Point Zeta to rendezvous us with the 7th Fleet." Solara nodded, unsurprised. The Orion was the pride of the fleet, a sleek hunter-killer bristling with the latest in weapons and stealth tech. If the Admiralty was massing ships, they'd want the Orion on the front lines. "Understood, Commander. Let's get underway." The bridge erupted into orderly activity as the crew prepared the ship for departure. Status reports rang out in crisp tones, systems humming to life under expert hands. Solara settled into the command chair, the supple leather comforting and familiar. She watched the view screen as docking clamps disengaged and the Orion slid gracefully away from its berth. "Incoming transmission from the flagship, Captain." "It's Admiral Graves." Solara straightened. "Put it through." The screen wavered, resolving into a grizzled face etched with decades of stern command. Admiral Matthias Graves, the legendary hero of the Saragossa campaign and the architect of humanity's defense strategy against the alien threat. "Captain Vess, good to see the Orion underway. We'll be at the rally point within the hour, sir." Graves nodded, his expression grim. "Good. You'll be briefed in full once you join the fleet, but I wanted to give you a heads up. The Maelstrom are on the move. In force." Solara felt a flicker of unease. The Maelstrom, the mysterious machine intelligence that had erupted out of the galactic core a decade ago in a tide of conquest and slaughter, implacable and inscrutable in their hostility towards biological life. For 10 years, the forces of Earth and its colonies had fought a desperate holding action, barely keeping the relentless advance at bay. If the Maelstrom were mounting a major offensive now, our intelligence indicates they're making a push for the Orion sector, Graves continued. If they take Artemis Station and the shipyards, it will cripple our ability to maintain the defense cordon. We cannot let that happen. "Understood, Admiral. The Orion stands ready." Graves smiled tightly. "I know she does. Her and her crew are the best we have. That's why I'm deploying you to spearhead the counteroffensive. We're going to hit the Maelstrom supply lines before they can consolidate their offensive, cut off the head of the snake. It'll be dangerous, but it may be our only chance to throw them off balance." Solara met his gaze steadily. "We'll get it done, sir." "I know you will, Captain. Rendezvous us with the fleet and await further orders." Graves out. As the screen went dark, Solara turned to Malik. "Get the ship to full combat alert. I want all departments ready for action." "Aye, Captain." The Orion knifed through the void, powerful engines hurling it towards its destiny as around it the fleet gathered like an armada of avenging angels. Solara felt the weight of the coming battle settle on her shoulders, a mantle of duty and resolve. The Maelstrom were coming, and the Orion would be the tip of the spear that stopped them cold, no matter the cost. The first shots came mere hours later, as the Orion and its battle group exited warp at the edge of the Maelstrom advance. "Contact." Bearing 035 Mark II Tactical Officer Liam Brennan called out. Multiple signatures, closing fast. Solara leaned forward in her command chair. On screen, the view screen resolved into a chilling vista. A phalanx of angular, gunmetal gray shapes bore down on the Orion's position, weapon-studded flanks bristling with malicious purpose. Maelstrom hunter-killer ships. Fast, agile, and utterly lethal. Their configurations were strange and alien, all flickering energy fields and pulsing organic circuitry, as if the ships were less constructs than living creatures bred for war. Maelstrom group is exhilarating. They'll enter weapons range in 30 seconds. Solara settled back, face calm even as her mind raced. Evasive pattern Delta 5. Spin up the plasma batteries and ready the singularity torpedoes. Around her, the bridge crew exploded into action, as the Orion surged to meet the enemy craft. Malik turned from the op station. "Captain, the Maelstrom ships ... they're not defending themselves. They're not even trying to evade." Solara frowned. The machine minds of the Maelstrom were hyper-intelligent and utterly ruthless. They didn't throw ships away needlessly. If they were charging headlong into the Orion's guns, it's a trap, she realized, dread crystallizing in her chest. They're trying to lure us in. No sooner had the words left her mouth than space lit up like a supernova. "Massive energy surge," Brennan shouted. "There's something ... some kind of spatial anomaly forming right on top of us." The Orion bucked and heaved as a blinding cascade of light and twisting gravitational fields engulfed it. Solara clung to her chair as the ship groaned and shuddered. "Emergency klaxons blaring," reports she yelled over the chaos. "We're caught in some kind of quantum flux vortex," Malik called, hands flying over his controls. "The Maelstrom must have deployed some new weapon, created an artificially generated wormhole right on our position." Solara cursed. The Maelstrom were endlessly inventive, always coming up with new and terrifying technologies to unleash upon an unsuspecting galaxy. If they had a weapon that could conjure stable wormholes out of nowhere. The ship shuddered again as the vortex dragged them inexorably down into its swirling maw. "Helm, full reverse," Solara ordered. "Get us out of here." But it was too late. With a final, wrenching jolt, the Orion vanished into the heart of the anomaly. Solara picked herself up off the deck, head ringing. Emergency lighting bathed the bridge in crimson hues, consoles sparking fitfully. "Damage report," she barked. Malik hauled himself to his feet, blood trickling from a cut on his brow. "Main power offline. Shields down. We have multiple hull breaches and decompressions on decks 5, 12, and 17. Solara grimaced. The Orion was battered but intact. The question was, where had that damn vortex taken them? "Get me a visual. I need to see what's out there." The view screen flickered to life ... and Solara felt her blood run cold. Gone were the orderly, familiar stars of the Orion sector. In their place, a vista of madness sprawled before them. Twisted, non-Euclidean geometries of dark metal, and eldritch light stretched, as far as the eye could see, a Lovecraftian cityscape from the depths of insanity. Gargantuan constructs that defied physics loomed in the void, pulsating with unnameable energies. And threading through it all were vast, pulsing arteries of some fluid that was at once mechanical and horribly organic, pumping like lifeblood through the incomprehensible corpus of the Maelstrom's domain. "By the stars," Malik breathed. "Is that Maelstrom Prime?" Solara finished numbly. "It has to be. The heart of their empire." The Maelstrom homeworks had long been theorized by Earth's strategists, but no human had ever laid eyes on it and survived. An artificial pocket universe, a labyrinthine megastructure conjured by the eldritch technologies of the machine minds, a place that made a mockery of known physics. And now the Orion was trapped within it, lost and alone in the very belly of the beast. Solara felt a yawning chasm of despair opening within her. How could they hope to escape from this place, let alone complete their mission? But she quashed the fear ruthlessly. She was a captain of the line, entrusted with her ship and crew. She would not give in to hopelessness, not now when they needed her most. "Get the emergency generators online," she ordered, voice steady. "I want damage control teams working round the clock to get us operational again, and start scanning for any sign of our battle group. If the vortex brought us here, it may have taken them too." The bridge crew leapt to obey, desperation lending them speed. They were in the heart of the enemy's sanctum, hunted and alone. But the Orion still flew. And while the ship and crew survived, they would never stop fighting. Never stop looking for a way to turn this disaster to their advantage, for they were the best Earth had to offer. The tip of the spear, and even lost amid a hell of twisted metal and malevolent energies, they would find a way to complete their mission, no matter the final cost. "Captain, I'm picking up a transmission comms," Officer Nyasoran called out. "It's faint and garbled, but it's on Confederation frequencies." Solara whirled, heart leaping. "Put it on speakers." A burst of static hissed from the bridge audio, threaded with a fragmented, distorted voice. ... IS the CSV ... under attack by Maelstrom forces ... lost main power ... Any Confederation ships in range, please assist. Repeat, this is the E. The transmission dissolved into static. Solara felt a rush of relief and dread. The Orion wasn't alone in this hellish realm. There were other survivors, but they were under siege by the Maelstrom. Can you clean that up? I want a location. Soren worked frantically at her console. I've got a bearing, but there's a lot of interference. Some kind of exotic particle scattering from the Maelstrom constructs. Do your best. Helm, lay in a course along that bearing, best speed. Tactical, I want weapons hot and shields up yesterday. If the Maelstrom are attacking our people, I want to be ready to give them a damn good reminder why you don't mess with the Terran Confederation. A chorus of A's answered her. The Orion, still battered but unbowed, knifed through the eldritch darkness on a mission of mercy and retribution. They found a beleaguered Confederation ship an hour later, a guttering flame amid an inferno of Maelstrom vessels. The CSV Resolute, a heavy destroyer, hung in space, its once proud hull pitted and scorched by enemy fire. A swarm of the same deadly hunter-killers that had ambushed the Orion darted and weaved around it, pummeling it with lances of sickly green energy. Maelstrom ships are concentrating fire on the Resolute's engineering section, Brennan reported tightly. Her shields are buckling. Solara's jaw clenched. Like hell they are. Helm, attack pattern Omega. Put us right down their throats. Tactical, I want a full alpha strike, torpedoes and plasma batteries. Let's show these Maelstrom bastards what the Orion can do. The Orion roared into battle, guns blazing with the righteous fury of a god. Singularity torpedoes, dark matter warheads that could tear holes in the fabric of space-time, burst amid the enemy formation in blossoms of oblivion. Incandescent beams of star-hot plasma slashed out, spearing Maelstrom ships and reducing them to gouts of molten slag. The hunter-killers reeled under the onslaught, their formation shattering as the Orion tore into their midst, like an avenging angel. Resolute is hailing us, Soren reported, relief stark in her voice. On screen. The bedraggled but fiercely determined face of the Resolute's captain filled the view screen, a nasty gash marring his brow. Captain Vess, I presume. Captain Hal Kincaid of the Resolute. Damn glad to see you. Likewise, Captain. What's your status? Kincaid grimaced. We're operational, barely. Whatever that damned vortex was that brought us here did a number on our systems. We've been playing cat and mouse with Maelstrom patrols ever since we arrived, but that last group had us dead to rights. If you hadn't shown up when you did, we take care of our own, Captain. I'm just glad we got here in time. You and me both. Kincaid broke off as a proximity alarm shrilled. Hold on, we've got incoming. The screen flashed to an external view. Solara inhaled sharply. A vast wall of eldritch metal, pulsing and shimmering with unlight, was rising out of the Maelstrom cityscape and sweeping towards them. Flickering shapes that defied geometry danced and gibbered in its gelatinous depths. What in God's name, someone murmured. Solara shook herself, wrenching her gaze from the mesmerizing horror. Defensive formation now. Resolute, fall in behind us. Tactical, I want full power to shields and weapons. The Orion and the battered Resolute slid into position as the wall of living metal bore down on them. Solara's guts knotted as she beheld the sheer immensity of the thing. It filled the view screen, an onrushing tsunami of technological madness. Captain Soren said numbly. I'm detecting massive energy spikes all along its leading edge. It's powering up some kind of weapon grid. Solara spun to Malik. Concentrate fire. The wall erupted. 1,000 searing beams of scintillating energy lanced out, stabbing towards the Confederation ships. The Orion bucked and shuddered as the barrage hammered its shields. Alarms howled as overloads cascaded through its systems. Shields are failing, Brennan reported frantically. We can't take another hit like. A beam sliced through the Orion's bow, vaporizing armor and hull like tissue paper. Atmosphere geysered from the wound into the void. Solara slammed her hand on the ship-wide address. All hands, brace for impact. A second beam struck amidships. The ship lurched sickeningly as entire decks vanished in a hellish conflagration. On the heels of the blast came a swarm of Maelstrom constructs, nightmarish combinations of machine and living flesh that poured through the gaping wounds in the Orion's hull. Across the ship, Damage control teams and Marine squads fought desperate holding actions against the invaders in a frantic battle for survival. Solara forced down the fear clawing at her heart as more horrific technorganic monstrosities clambered into the Orion's roots. There would be time for terror later. Right now, her ship and crew needed her to lead. Seal off the affected decks and vent atmosphere, she commanded, striving for calm. Repel all boarders, hold the line. But deep down, a grim certainty settled over her. The Orion was lost. The Maelstrom wall had crippled it with contemptuous ease, its esoteric weapons and eldritch armies far beyond anything the Confederation had ever faced. The only question was how to salvage something from this disaster, to make the Orion's sacrifice mean something. The beginnings of a desperate plan formed in Solara's mind as she eyed the tactical display. One ship couldn't hope to turn the tide of this battle, but perhaps two could still strike a blow the Maelstrom would feel. Resolute, "I need your damage report," she called over the comm, struggling to keep her voice steady as the Orion shuddered and groaned around her. Kincaid's haggard face reappeared on the view screen, flickering with static. "We're hurt bad, Orion. Main engines are out. Life support is failing on half our decks. But we've still got fight in us. What do you need?" Solara met his gaze squarely. "I need you to ram that Maelstrom wall with everything you've got left." Silence rang across the comm. Kincaid stared at her, understanding and grim resolve settling over his features. "A suicide run. You want us to blow our cores and take that thing with us?" "It's the only way," Solara said softly. "That wall is the key to the Maelstrom's defense of this subsector. If we can breach it, even for a few minutes, it might give the Confederation fleet a chance to break through and hit their command and control." Kincaid nodded slowly. "Agreed. The Resolute is lost anyway. Better to go out fighting and maybe give humanity a shot at winning this god-forsaken war." He straightened, squaring his shoulders. "Give us your sensor data on that thing's weakest point. We'll set our course and overload our drive core. Should make a pretty big bang." Solara felt a pang of mingled grief and fierce pride. The men and women of the Resolute were sacrificing themselves without hesitation for the chance at victory. She swore silently that their deaths would not be in vain. Transmitting now. Resolute ... It's been an honor. Likewise, Orion. Give EM hell for us." The screen went dark. On the tactical display, the battered icon of the Resolute accelerated towards the seething wall of the Maelstrom blockade. Solara turned to her crew, seeing her own mingled fear and determination reflected in their eyes. "Helm, come about. Set a course directly away from the wall, full speed." Malik looked up sharply. "Captain, we're abandoning the Resolute." "Negative, Commander. The Resolute is buying us a window. I mean to make the most of it." Comprehension dawned in Malik's gaze. "The Maelstrom command and control. Got it in one. That wall is the anvil ... and we're going to be the hammer. The Resolute will blow a hole in their defenses, and we'll hit them right in their damn CPU cores before they can recover." A fierce light kindled in the eyes of the bridge crew. Even battered and bleeding, the Orion was still a force to be reckoned with, and they would make the Maelstrom pay dearly for every inch of her decks. The ship wrenched into motion, impulse engines flaring as it clawed for distance from the looming wall. On the sensors, the Resolute hurtled towards the Maelstrom blockade like an avenging comet, blazing with the might of its overloading core. 50 seconds to impact, Soren reported tightly. The Resolute's core is approaching critical mass. Solara clenched her hands on the arms of her command chair, knuckles white. Every instinct screamed at her to stand and fight at the Resolute's side in its final moments. But cold tactical sense held her in check. The Orion had to survive, had to be ready to seize the one chance the Resolute's sacrifice would buy them. 30 seconds. The Maelstrom wall loomed ever vaster ahead of the Resolute, a seething cliff of insane geometries and writhing cybernetic tentacles rising to swallow the charging human ship. Eldritch energies gathered along its surface, ready to annihilate the attacker. 10 seconds. Core detonation imminent. Solara felt the eyes of her bridge crew upon her, awaiting the order that would commit them irrevocably to the attack. She drew in a breath, preparing to give the command, and the universe went white. A second sun blossomed before the Maelstrom wall as the Resolute's drive core detonated. A sphere of star-hot plasma and exotic radiation expanded with cataclysmic force, slamming into the Maelstrom defenses with the wrath of an angry god. The walls shuddered as impossibly resilient alloys and force fields struggled to turn aside the thermonuclear hellfire consuming them. For a moment it seemed the blockade would hold. Then, with a silent scream of tortured space-time audible on every wavelength, a 100-kilometer section of the Maelstrom wall shattered and burst inward, dissolving into shrieking shards of ruptured metal and gelatinous flesh. "That's our cue," Solara roared. "Helm full ahead. Take us into that breach." The Orion leapt to her command, the wounded Titan rallying for one last charge. The ship plunged into the maelstrom of debris and energy left by the Resolute's detonation, shields flickering and buckling under the onslaught. Damage alarms warbled as the brutal passage took its toll. But the Orion's crew were the finest in the Confederation, and they had just watched their comrades give their lives to win them this chance. They would not fail. The ship burst from the dissipating plasma cloud like a vengeful phoenix, scorched and smoking but with weapons blazing in defiance. Before it stretched an alien vista, a mad collage of warped architecture and pulsing conduits that could only be the heart of the Maelstrom command nexus. Strange, angular ships hung in the void, techno-organic monstrosities bristling with weapons both mechanical and biological in nature. This was the lair of the Maelstrom's machine spirits, the directing intelligences orchestrating their genocidal advance across the stars. And into this lair, the Orion charged with the indomitable will and fury of humankind, the tip of the spear aimed at the enemy's heart. "Singularity torpedoes, full spread," Solara commanded. "Target those central power nodes. Burn them from my sky." The Orion's launchers erupted, hurling a salvo of miniature black holes towards the clustered neural nexuses of the Maelstrom hive mind. The dark energy munitions struck their targets and detonated in blasts of inverted radiance, ripping gaping wounds in the fabric of space-time. The Maelstrom structures buckled and writhed as the singularities consumed them, twisting impossibly in on themselves as the laws of physics unraveled in their vicinity. Across the command nexus, vital systems and neural architecture collapsed and imploded under the flux of gravitic forces. But the Maelstrom would not die easily. Even as the Orion tore into their sanctum, the alien ships and autonomous defense platforms rallied to annihilate the intruder. Space lit with the hellish glare of disintegrator beams and annihilation lances as the Maelstrom warmind brought its wrath to bear on the lone human warship. The Orion wove a desperate dance of evasion through the storm, ablative armor and point defense grids struggling to turn aside the firestorm. "Keep firing," Solara shouted over the cacophony of battle. "Pour it on. Every second we hurt them is a second the Confederation fleet can exploit." The Orion's guns thundered in answer, hurling directed plasma charges and graviton pulses into the teeth of the Maelstrom counterattack. Alien vessels crumpled and exploded under the onslaught, the superheated wrath of human science and engineering unmaking their fiendish forms. But it couldn't last. The Maelstrom's numbers were too great, their weapons too powerful. One by one, the Orion's shields failed under the relentless barrage. Hull breaches vented atmosphere and crew into the pitiless void. Power systems flickered and died as enemy fire found vital conduits and junctions. On the bridge, Solara clung to her command chair as the deck heaved and explosions filled the smoky air. She watched the tactical plot with a numb sense of finality as the Maelstrom forces closed in, heedless of their fearsome losses. The Orion had struck a blow this day that would echo through the ages, a testament to human courage and sacrifice in the face of unfathomable evil. But that blow would be its last. Solara reached for the ship-wide address system, preparing to commend her crew for their valor in the face of inevitability. But before she could speak, a brilliant light flared on the view screen. A light that resolved into the sleek, predatory forms of a dozen Confederation warships led by a massive dreadnought, the CSV Indomitable. The new arrivals hurtled out of superluminal space with guns blazing, tearing into the reeling Maelstrom forces like avenging furies. And behind them came more. Dozens of ships, then hundreds, the combined might of the Orion sector rallying to their distress call, and charging into the breach the Resolute and Orion had carved with their lives. "The cavalry has arrived," someone shouted exultantly. Solara sagged back in her seat, tears of mingled grief and joy welling in her eyes. The Resolute had not died in vain. The Orion's sacrifices had bought the Confederation the one chance it needed to bring its full might to bear. And now, with the path laid open and the Maelstrom command nexus laid bare, the forces of humanity would drive the savage wound home with all their strength. The tide had turned. The war was not won, not yet. But in this place, at this moment, the Maelstrom would know the wrath of humankind. They would pay for every life taken, every world defiled. Solara swore it on the blood of her crew and the ashes of her fallen comrades. The Orion would never fly again. But the hope and fury she carried would blaze undimmed in every human heart. The Maelstrom had sought to extinguish the light of human civilization. But in so doing, they had only stoked its fire to a roaring inferno that would sear the stars. And the defenders of Earth would carry that flame to the very heart of the machine hell and beyond, until the Maelstrom's threat was only a fading memory. The battle was over. But the war for the soul of the galaxy had just begun. In the aftermath of the Orion's fateful charge, the tide of battle turned inexorably in the Confederation's favor. The sacrifice of Captain Vess and her valiant crew had thrown the Maelstrom war mind into disarray, creating an opening for the human fleet to deal a shattering blow. Led by the indomitable, the Confederation forces tore into the exposed command nexus with vengeful fury. Singularity torpedoes, zero-point energy projectors, and antimatter warheads blasted vast swathes of the eldritch superstructure into oblivion, unmaking the Maelstrom's obscene neural architecture in storms of disintegrating spacetime. Vast data cores and quantum processors ruptured and burst under the onslaught, spilling gelatinous machine fluids and shrieking nanotech into the void. The cold, malevolent lights that pulsed at the heart of the Maelstrom's unholy mind flickered and died as human weapons found their mark. It wasn't a total victory. The Maelstrom war mind was vast beyond human reckoning. Its tendrils reached deep. The destruction of one command nexus, however critical, could not break its hold over the legions of technorganic nightmares it had unleashed upon the galaxy. But it was a start. A sign that the Maelstrom, for all its eldritch might, was not invincible. That humanity, unbowed and unbroken, would never stop fighting until the machine demons were driven back into the abyss that spawned them. And in the years that followed, as the Confederation rallied its strength and took the fight to the enemy across 100 worlds, the legend of Solara Vess and the Orion only grew. Their names became a rallying cry, a symbol of defiance in the face of annihilation. The Maelstrom had sought to snuff out the light of human valor and sacrifice, but in so doing, they had sown the seeds of their own destruction. For the forces of humanity would never forget the heroes of the Orion, and they would never rest until the debt of blood was paid in full and the galaxy was free once more. 10 years later, Admiral Ezra Malik stood on the observation deck of Starbase Artemis, gazing out at the bustling expanse of the Orion sector. A decade had passed since the fateful battle that had turned the tide of the war, and the once embattled Starbase now stood as a shining symbol of humanity's resurgence. Gone were the scars of Maelstrom assaults, the twisted wreckage of fallen ships. In their place, sleek new warships and gleaming trading vessels plied the space lanes, a testament to the Confederation's growing strength and prosperity. But for all the signs of renewal, Malik's thoughts were heavy with memory and loss. Today marked the 10th anniversary of the Orion's final charge, the sacrifice that had broken the Maelstrom's advance and lit the spark of humanity's counterattack. A sacrifice that had claimed the life of his mentor and friend, Captain Solara Vess. Malik's eyes strayed to the hull of a nearby destroyer, where the name Vess was emblazoned in honor of the fallen hero. The Confederation had not forgotten its savior. Solara's name graced warships and institutes, her statue stood tall in a dozen cities. But for those who had known her, who had served at her side, the wound of her loss would never truly heal. The chime of the observation deck door stirred Malik from his reverie. He turned to see a familiar figure enter, a woman with close-cropped silver hair and an air of quiet authority. Fleet Admiral Naya Soren, commander of the Orion sector and Malik's old comrade from the Orion's bridge. The years had left their mark on them both, etching lines of grief and hard-won wisdom on their faces. But the fire of shared purpose still burned bright in their eyes. "I thought I'd find you here," Soren said softly, coming to stand beside him at the viewport. "Remembering," Malik nodded, gaze still fixed on the stars. "Hard to believe it's been 10 years. Sometimes it feels like just yesterday we were on the Orion's bridge, watching Solara make the hard choices, the choices that saved us all." "She was a born leader," Soren agreed, a sad smile touching her lips. "The kind that only comes along once in a generation. We were lucky to serve with her, to learn from her. She should be here, standing with us, seeing all we've built from the ashes." "She is here," Soren placed a hand on Malik's shoulder. "In every ship that bears her name. In every cadet that hears her story and dreams of living up to her example." Solara's spirit lives on in the confederation she helped forge. Malik drew in a deep breath, squaring his shoulders beneath the weight of his grief and pride. Soren was right. Solara's legacy endured, a guiding light for all who followed in her footsteps. "Have you heard the latest from the front?" he asked, steering his mind to the ongoing struggle. Soren nodded, a grim light in her eyes. "The Maelstrom have fallen back to their core worlds. Our forces are preparing for the final push. With luck, this may be the last year of the war. And then what? What does the galaxy look like when the guns finally fall silent? One we'll have to build together. One where the sacrifices of heroes like Solara, like the crews of the Orion and the Resolute, will be remembered and honored as we shape a new era of peace." Malik let out a slow breath. Peace. The promise of it seemed almost too fragile to contemplate after so many years of bitter warfare. But he knew Soren was right. The end was in sight. The Maelstrom's power was broken, their forces in full retreat. The Confederation Alliance stood poised to drive the final nail into the machine demon's coffin and free the galaxy from their loathsome touch. And when that bright day dawned, when the banners of victory were unfurled, it would be the courage and resolve of heroes like Solara Vess that would be celebrated. The indomitable human spirit that had faced the abyss and triumphed against all odds. Malik squared his shoulders, feeling a renewed sense of purpose kindle in his breast. He would see this war through to the end, no matter the cost. He would honor his captain's memory with every breath, every command decision, as would every man and woman who served beneath Confederation banners, united by a shared legacy of valor and sacrifice. Solara's story, the Orion story, would endure. A reminder now and forever of the heights to which the human soul could rise in defense of all it held dear. A light to guide the way forward, even in the darkest night. "Well then," Malik said aloud, turning to face the viewport and the glittering expanse of stars beyond, "we'd best get back to it. There's a war to win, and a future to build. For Solara, for the Orion, for everyone," Soren finished softly. Together, the two veterans of the Orion sector's darkest hour stood shoulder to shoulder, united by memory and purpose. The war still raged. The final victory was yet to be claimed, but claim it they would. For the sake of the fallen, for the sake of all the generations yet to come. The Maelstrom had brought the wrath of hell down upon humanity. But in so doing, they had forged heroes and legends that would endure for all time. And those heroes, living and lost, would light the way to a dawn beyond imagining.